Let me tell you how we started. Being a publisher, I'm always checking book racks to see if my books are out there. And I was at Barnes & Noble up on Broadway, I think 84th Street, checking the romance section book rack. For your information, we're the second largest romance publisher in the world today. And by the way, we're the largest Afro-American publisher in the world. And I was up checking the book racks, and there were two Afro-American women going to the rack looking for books. And I heard one say to the other, "How come there's no books for us?" And of course my ears perked up. I said, "What'd you say?" And she looked at me. She said, "There's no books for us. All I'm buying is a Taylor or Silver Summerfield, and in those days that's what we're publishing." And I politely took my card out, which I didn't have. Of course, I carried a blank card. I introduced myself, and of course they didn't know who I was. They probably thought I was trying to pick them up, frankly. And I said, "Tell me more." They said, "We've been buying romances for years and years and years, but there's nothing that really pertains to us." Well, I had this on my mind for many, many years, because many, many years ago, I guess I'll date myself, about 38 years ago, I published an African-American magazine the size of Jet called Our Life. And I had great problems trying to get distribution, and I went to see a guy named Johnny Johnson, who owned Jet. And Ebony told my problem. He said, "You're ahead of your times. You'll never get distribution. You're in the wrong world. You're in a black world. You're a white man." And he said, "If they have distribution, you won't get paid anyway." So I politely gave up the idea, gave the magazine over to Johnny Johnson, whatever he did with, I don't know, and got out of the field. I came back to the office, and Monica Harris, who was working for us, by the way, she went on to head finally the Book of the Month Club Black Division.
Black Expressions.
Black Expressions. And it was kind of interesting, by the way. When she started it, the guy who ran the entire operation said to me, "Well, this would be a nice club. We'll have about 5,000 members." And I looked at him. I said, "Are you nuts? This is a big field." They ended with 400,000 members. It turns out the most impressive and successful book club, the Book of the Month Club ever had. Well, going back to what I did, I came back and said, "Monica, how would you like to edit a line of Afro-American romances for women?" Well, you should have seen her. She was looking at me like, first she thought I was crazy. I said, "Let's go do it." And we did. And then I was talking to Johnny Johnson again. He's not alive anymore, so I went out to see him. I said, "We're trying to get authors." And it's very difficult to get authors in those days. And he said to me, "You don't have trouble getting authors, Walter. Get some white authors if you want." I said, "No." Of course, if you ever notice on the back of our books, we have pictures of our authors. And I said, "We can't. We have pictures of our authors." He said, "It's going to take you a long time to get enough writers." Because when the word went out, there were so many wonderful African-American authors who were sitting a long time waiting to be published. And we started to sell our best line. And at that point, I decided, it'd be interesting to do motion pictures and have a book club. I went down to see a fellow named Bob Johnson, who most people know. He owned the BET, the television network, which is now bought by Viacom. And for your information, he sold BET to Viacom for $3 billion. And he started with about, I guess, $80,000. So you can imagine what he did. I went down to see him. I said, "Bob, I would like to do low-budget Afro-American films. And would you like to join me?" Because I said, "We can put them on BET, which is the only cable network around for Afro-Americans." I said, "And also, I want to use your clout on the cable network to start a book club, an Afro-American book club." And he looked at me and said, "That's a great idea." But then he said, "I want to control." Well, I don't, in my world now, no one controls what I want to do. I said, "We could be 50-50, but you can't have control." He turned around at me and said, "I'll buy the whole black line for you." I looked at him, and my son was there, and a publisher was there. And I'll tell you, this was very open with mine. I was thinking doing $400,000, but we were making $400,000. I think I had a $400,000 investment. And I looked at him. He said, "What do you want?" I looked at him and I said, "I can't figure this out. I just came down to make a deal with you to become your partner, and now you're going to buy up my Afro-American line." So I quickly said, $12 million. I didn't blink an eye. He said to me, "I'll give you between 11 and 12 million. But The guy never even took a look at the numbers. And this is an absolutely true story because it was published. 5 weeks later, after he did some due diligence for one day, I received a certified check for $11 million. And of course, it's all history, what we wanted to do. I had an agreement with him I couldn't publish any romances for 5 years, so I started a new line called Delphino, which was general novel, nonfiction, and everything else, which went on to become a very successful line. I hate to say this. Bob Johnson, who I think he's a great businessman, he's smart as a whip, but he wasn't a publisher. And that line really went down the drain. We tried to buy it back, but it didn't work. And so we built our own line all over again, and we do many, many, many millions of dollars on it. And still having that motion picture idea in mind, I've had it for a long time. A good friend of mine for the last 25 years, a fellow named Roy Campanella II. Now, if anybody knows anything about baseball, his father was a great catcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and it was very interesting. I was a kid growing up in Brooklyn. I watched him as a catcher. Now his son is my partner in a new film division called Kensington Media, and we're developing lower budget African American films for general release and for DVDs and probably for television. We're shooting our first film in October this year. It's from a script that he wrote, which is being rewritten, and it's going to be novelized by Mary Monroe, who's probably one of our best writers we have. And from that, it all started to grow and grow and grow. In fact, I hope in the next 2 weeks to make an announcement, I'm going to buy another Afro-American line, probably the oldest line of Afro-American books in this country. And it should be very exciting. We're going to continue to grow this line, and we're going to continue to look for more and more authors. We're trying to penetrate other markets in this country. We are finding more and more now we can open up more and more supermarkets. In the beginning, it was difficult opening up supermarkets. In the beginning, it was even opening up some of the big chains until they realized that our Americans do read. Because my history in this whole thing goes back, if you don't mind me talking, to World War II. I was in a war, and I said to somebody, I don't know, where are the African-American soldiers? I mean, we're fighting a war. And he said to me, and this is actually a true story, they're in another army. I said, what army? We're still fighting the same enemy. And then, of course, I met up with them, and yeah, they were doing other duties, putting up radar antennas and everything else. And it always bothered me that people didn't understand, frankly, we're really the same. And it goes back to when I went to high school, when we had a great tennis player at Erasmus Hall, who really should have gone to Miami University. He was a great tennis player. His name was Sonny Jackson. I never forget how long I lived. And I remember saying, you know, you want to get a scholarship down at the University of Miami, and Gardner Malloy, I'm a tennis player, by the way. Gardner Malloy would make you a great tennis player. But in those days, if you think about it, the blacks never had a chance. In tennis, Theo Gibson, broke down the barrier. But the truth is, he was a great player. And it always was on my mind. I said, there's something wrong with our society we live in. And so I thought, there's a real market. There was a market then, to tell the truth. But the market is much bigger. And I think the market, I don't think we even touched what it's going to be in the next 10 or 15 years. I see it. I see it for a number of blacks who go to colleges. We're involved with a group called Harlem RBI. Very much involved. I helped build this baseball field up in Harlem. I have scholarships for 3 kids to go to college. And I see these kids coming out. I see how bright they are. I see the great desire to get ahead. And that's why I know that I'm on the right path for what we're doing. And I'm still looking at other areas in the African American field to grow. Right now we're nonfiction, we're in fiction, we're in romance, we do even mysteries. In fact, I'm now looking to I would like to do an African American female detective, which has never really been done. And I think there's a market of so many different areas, frankly. But I see little by little, we're breaking down barriers with our distributors. It was not so easy. It's not so easy to convince Borders or Books of Me and down south. By the way, that's a very good chain. To take the books on, it was not difficult to get Barnes & Noble to do this. Barnes & Noble, frankly, we said, why don't you put the books in the whole African American area? Because if you're looking for an African American book, you generally go to that area. They're afraid to do it. So he mixed African American books in with the other books, and I think eventually you're going to realize that's not the way to distribute. Borders does it another way, and they do pretty well. Books A Million does it the other way, you know. And we're slowly developing our own book club. And I think there is a real market out there for that. But I see there are other areas that we're breaking into. It's taken years to do this, years to convince a lot of retailers that there is a real market for it, you know. But I think as the African American area grows and more kids get out of college and want to read and want to be interested, I think that's exciting to me. And that's something that I've been thinking about for so many years. I've been publishing for over 50 years. And years ago, I published Mario Puzo. I published Lady Sings the Blues, by the way, which is another story. It was my book. I published it at another company. And I thought we were going to win. I don't know if you realize it. It was up for Academy Award, if you ever old enough to know this. And I was sitting and I said, geez, my book might win an Academy Award. But I was pretty stupid, I was told. In those days, a black person never won an Academy Award. Nobody, not to my knowledge. And so it all began to grow on me, and that's what I kind of go through and decided to do what I'm going to do. And it was against all odds, but the truth is I do very, very well at it. It's growing, and it will continue to grow. And I'm looking for other areas. I would like to try to distribute more and more overseas. We're also trying to distribute more and more books into the military, which is a big area. It's a slow process, but it's working. I'm happy to get into it. The only thing that always bothers me, I get everybody now trying to get into it, everybody trying to steal your horses away, which everybody knows about it, trying to get into all the markets that we opened up. And I'll tell you one or two other stories, which I had asked if I could say it, and they said, say whatever you want. When we first decided to go in the African American field, I decided to go out myself and solicit orders. The reason I did that, I probably know every distributor in this country. Every wholesaler, every distributor, every chain, and some of the big bookstores. I came out of the marketing area. What bothers me, and I learned it the bitter way, there's still out of business. When I first went around this country to open up areas, I was called a nigger lover. In fact, somebody said, you're a Jewish nigger lover. Well, I held my temper. I hate to say this also, some of the buyers were women. I was very disturbed. But they didn't realize I knew all the owners of their companies. And I hate to say this, I had 3 of them fired. I would not stand for this. And it was not so easy. And I think what always does bother me is no one really realized how difficult it was to get distribution. You understand, to change people's minds. And I knew it took time. And it took, later on, we started spending more and more money before we started turning around and seeing a profit. Of course, in many ways I thank Bob Johnson because he gave us the money to build it on the line, understand. But there's a great future to this, and I want it to grow. I need people like Glenn here, who also now writes for another African-American publisher. I know that, probably pays her more than I pay her, but she's my buddy. And I must tell you, she dedicated her first book to me. I remember it, I never forgot that. Anybody want to say something?
Well, I dedicated the book to Walter because I appreciated the fact that had it not been for you, I wouldn't have been writing. And I appreciated what you did, and I know that you took a big chance financially and otherwise. You didn't have the support of anybody.
I remember there's a little glass plaque there. BET had a big party in New York City, down in the village. You must be there. And there must be 300 black authors there. It was very interesting. I think there were 300 black authors and 3 white people, me and my wife and somebody else. But somebody got up, I don't know if you remember this, and said, this man here, Mrs. I, without him, none of us would be here because none of us would have a chance to write. I should have recorded that because it made me so damn happy that suddenly people, I gave all these people a chance to get started. They all want to write for me, write for other publishers, but they have a chance, understand, to go forward. In fact, one of my great writers I love was James Walton. I thought he was great. and there's a few others, but all when I knew of him, he wrote Go Tell It to a Mountain in the studio of William Styron. And William Styron is my neighbor in Connecticut. So Styron told me the story of James Baldwin writing his Go Tell It to a Mountain in Connecticut. It's always kind of fun. Anyway, I have not much more to say. I better be very quiet here.
Any questions?
I'm just riveted. And I know you got a lot more because we spoke offline about some of the things that you experienced in the not so distant past. You know, the racism and the bigotry and the reluctance to publish works by Black people.
I remember, and I said I'm always careful what I say. I remember we first launched this line. I was with Monica Harris at some of the Black conventions. And the people came over to her and said, "Who owns the company?" She said, "That man there." Well, of course, I'm standing out. I'm a white man. And they said, "What?" She said, "What? I'm running it. It's his money, but I'm running it." And they resented it. And some people said, "I don't like the idea that a white man is making money on the back of a black man." I heard this. And Monica said to me, a lovely woman, by the way, she said to me, "Walter, don't let it bother you." And it really did. But I was disturbed that that's the way they think. In fact, you know, Monica Harris went on, besides going to the book a month ago. I don't know if you they had in the Daily News, the front page, the top 100 people who are going to make it big. Well, Monica Harris was one of them. And Monica Harris got the plaque from the NAACP because my friend happened to be there. The head of that division, and she was there, and she always said to me, and at that meeting, which always made me happy, they asked her to say a few words, and she said, "You know, I wouldn't be here if this man standing here didn't give me the first chance." And she said, "I remember what he went through when he went with me," but she was great, and we went on to do many things together, and that's all I have to say. You know, it was not an easy road, but nothing. In my opinion, nothing you do is going to be successful comes easy. Anyway, never to me. I learned it a long time ago. I learned it in war, by the way. I said something else, by the way. I said, you know, if they didn't kill me in World War II, nothing would kill me. And nothing will frighten me. I was on the beaches of all R&D1, so I can tell you nothing will frighten me. And by the way, sure, people who's listening, I wrote my own book, which is now in the West Coast. The new title is The Memories We Keep. I'm going to plug my own book. Go out and look for it. It's a great book. Everybody loves it. You can find it at any of the major stores. Otherwise, it's called Amazon. You'll know more about it. Thank you.
I just remembered once at a conference, and this was speaking at a workshop, and all of us aspiring African American authors were there. And Walter was speaking, and he said, "Let me tell you one thing," he said, "never let anybody tell you you can't do it." You did. He said, "Never let anybody tell you you can't do it." And you told us that one famous author sold his book after the 128th editor read it. And the book stayed on the New York Times best-selling list for 2 years.
2 years.
Right. And he said, "Let that be a lesson to you." He said, "If somebody tells you you can't do it, ignore them. Go ahead, you know you can do it, do it." And he really did. He said, "Now," he said, "I want all of you to write me a book."
I will tell you, since we're talking, I guess you people know who Jim Brown is, a great running back. Well, Jim Brown was trying to sell his book. I must be honest with you, every publisher turned him down. Why? Because they were afraid of him. You know, Jim Brown has it. But Jim Brown, I did his book. Stayed on New York Times bestseller list, hardbound book, for about, I think, 8 or 9 weeks. And it turned out Brown, I'm going to plug for this guy, I think, frankly, is a terrific guy. He worked with us, he did everything for us, and he said to me later on, "You know, Walter, everything you promised me, you delivered." And I said to Jim, "Everything you promised me, you delivered." And his book was terrific. It goes into his problems when he was at Syracuse University. I'm not playing the book because it's been off sale a long time. that went to Syracuse University. People didn't know it. He didn't have a scholarship. The people of Manhasset, Long Island, put up the money for the first year. And whenever he traveled traveled with his high school football coach. I said, why your high school football coach? He said, because he is my friend and my mentor. He made me what I am today. He said he dropped out playing football at Manhasset High because of some problems he had at home. His high school football coach said to him, go back to school. You don't want to live where you're living. You're going to live with me for the last year. Because if you do it, you're going to end up going to a hell of a college. And as you know, he became the greatest running back in the history of football. And because of his high school football coach, and that was his mentor. And Jim Brown and I talk out on occasion, because I gave him a lot of credit, because he's another guy who also put his money where his mouth is. I remember being out in California a number of years ago, and I've been having dinner with him. Because he always impressed me. I never saw with the same woman twice. But that was Jim Brown. And he introduced me to O.J. Simpson, and that's another story. But he said after the dinner, he said to me, I want you to come back to my house. I said, why? He said, I want you to introduce you to some people. And my partner, who died, unfortunately, Roberta Gudge, came with me. He walked into the room. The room was loaded. He lived, by the way, in Hollywood Hills. I think he still lives there. Went back. I walked into the room, and boy, this place was loaded with a bunch of pretty rough Afro-Americans and a few women. And he said, I want you to introduce you to these people. Who are they? The Crips and the Bloods. And he said, sit down here. I'm sitting between the captains and the Crips and the Bloods. And I jokingly, I said, who's got the guns? And he said to me, seriously, they're checked in the closet. I laughed. And if I had a recording, I wish we had it like that, but listening to what they told me about the LA police and what was happening out there. And Brown was a savior. Brown used to go into the jails to try to rehabilitate the prisoners. And he wanted me to go with him. I said, Jim, I'm the wrong guy. I got the wrong color of skin. I said, but to this day, I must tell you something, I learned a lot from him. And the thing is, don't be afraid also. Do what you want to do. And he also told me about playing football. He said, I learned something in football. And I think I learned it in business. When you go to tackle, you'll go straight at him. You hear what I'm saying to you? In the world of business, when I go to tackle me, I go straight at him. I learned something about that. And so he was really, in many ways, one of my great favorites.
That's wonderful. Before we stop, I just wanted to echo or emphasize your vision for the future of African American books. So often in the media we hear about what the bad stuff that's being published and the negative stuff that's being published, and despite the number of books, there's nothing really good out there. But you really have a much more positive outlook on Black leadership and so forth. And I just want you to kind of emphasize that a little bit more, what you see, what the trends are that you see developing, and the plans that you have to exploit those trends.
And I had a theory, if you want to get people to read, let them read anything. Read them comic books, whatever it is. Automotive magazines, men's adventure magazines. But you got to get the people to read. You got to get them, and by the way, my granddaughter's sitting looking at me. She's a teacher, by the way. And I have a theory of getting people to read. So I think the first thing we were doing, I'll be honest with you, with the romance field, was getting people to pick up books to read. At that point, they start reading different types of books. We're publishing a lot of different kinds of books, frankly, far above anything I thought I was going to be able to do. Because once again, when you see the number of kids getting out of college, you see the whole education level is growing. And you have to be aware of it, The trouble is, I think, and it's funny for me, who's been around a long time, is not a kid anymore. The trouble with most people are living in the past. I don't want to live in the past. I spend a lot of time going out there to meet readers, whether it's white or Afro-American readers. You have to understand the world is changing. The dynamics of what's going on is changing. And as these more and more kids get out of college and get a damn good education, they're interested in reading other types of material. So I see we're raising the level slowly raising the level of the books we're publishing. We're doing more and more trade books, which we're now selling for almost $15, because that's our open market. And that market now is growing. Originally, we had trouble getting those trade books into, well, our biggest account had to be Walmart. And Walmart is our biggest account. And it's a great account. It took us problems to get our trade books into Walmart. We were able to get paperback books into Walmart, and lower price paperback books. Finally, we convinced them, try some trade books, try some higher price trade books. And then we began to sell. Same thing with Barnes & Noble and Borders and Books A Million and a lot of other chains. Now the truth is, we're now trying to break into Costco and Sam's and BJ's, and eventually we will break in. These are big markets. Once you break into Costco and Sam's is a discount operation for Walmart. Once you break in there, all the walls are going to tumble. So, but it's a slow war. But we're now finally breaking into Walmart and some of the other big chains with trade-sized books, and now they're selling. Because originally they said, oh, you know, I don't think the box on it's $15 for this book. Well, they found they were crazy. They do spend. They want the book, and it's a good book, they're going to spend the money. First of all, many of them have good jobs, and they're making money and they're educated. But unfortunately, a lot of retailers don't understand. So I think we're trading up, frankly, and I think it's going to continue.